Horatio Nelson, the real Chad of the Royal Navy, who managed to repel Napoleon's forces from attacking England and became a menace to anyone who opposed him on the seas. Horatio Nelson was truly the first rock star of England and was adored all over the country. He rose to fame during the Napoleonic Wars and was born in 1758 in Norfolk, England. For reference, Norfolk is a county in the east of England, located on the coast. Horatio Nelson came from a very naval family and joined the Royal Navy at a very young age. His father, Edmund Nelson, was a clergyman, which is a male priest, and his mother, Kathleen Suckling, came from a Navy family. So bear in mind, if you've watched a film like Master and Commander, you'll notice that there's a lot of young, children essentially on board, and that was just a common practice in those days. People grew up very, very quickly. So Nelson's maternal uncle, Captain Maurice Suckling, was a senior officer in the Royal Navy, and through these naval connections, he was introduced to the profession at an early stage and developed serious interest in spending his entire career at sea. The most notable occurrence in young Horatio's life was when he was appointed to the HMS Reasonable at age 12, a 64 gunship commanded by his uncle, Captain Suckling. He later became a captain at 20, which has me question what I'm doing with my life. This was truly the beginning of what would become a stunning naval career. Now in this video I want to cover 3 key battles that Horatio Nelson took part in: the Battle of the Nile, the Battle of Copenhagen, and of course the Battle of Trafalgar. So the most earliest battle, which is the Battle of the Nile, was one of Horatio Nelson's most notable battles, and this took place in the Mediterranean campaign of the French Revolutionary Wars, of course. The French fleet, under the command of a name I would probably butcher into oblivion, but I will show the name on screen, was transporting Napoleon's army to Egypt with the aim to threaten British interests in the region. Napoleon's plans essentially were to disrupt British-held India, due to the fact India held a massive amount of wealth for the British Empire. On the night of August 1st, 1798, Nelson executed an unconventional manoeuvre known as Nelson's Touch, which we will come on to later on as it plays a very integral part in his most famous battle. The British fleet divided the French line and engaged in close quarter combat. The battle lasted into the early hours of August 2nd, 1798, and Nelson achieved a decisive victory, destroying nearly the entire French fleet. The French flagship exploded during the battle and contributed to a catastrophic defeat for the French. Meanwhile, for the British, they suffered relatively light casualties compared to the French, and I think the significance of this battle should not be overlooked. The victory disrupted Napoleon's plans for an overland invasion of British-held India and secured British naval dominance in the region. Back home in England, this battle established Nelson as a national hero and marked a major turning point in the Napoleonic Wars in this region. The battle, although a setback for Napoleon's ambitions in the Middle East, did not stop him from returning to France and ultimately rising to a position of immense power. The Battle of Copenhagen of 1801 was, in Nelson's own words, the hardest battle he had ever fought. Admiral Nelson, under the command of Admiral Sir Hyde Parker, set sail from Great Yarmouth to Denmark. Denmark, although officially neutral, was seen as a potential ally of France, and its powerful navy was seen as a significant factor. Thus, this created a conflict between the British and the combined forces of Denmark and Norway, as the British were desperate to not allow Denmark's fleet to fall into the French hands, which could cause the balance of naval power to favour Napoleon. In April of 1801, the British fleet approached Copenhagen. The Danes were under the command of Admiral Olfert Fischer, who was defending their capital. The battle lasted a few days and had heavy casualties on both sides. One of the most notable moments from Nelson in this battle came when he disobeyed his superior's orders to discontinue the attack if the battle became too difficult. He allegedly put his telescope to his blind eye and claimed he couldn't see the signal to withdraw. Overall, the battle ended inconclusively, but it did mean that the Danes were compelled to withdraw from the League of Armed Neutrality, which was a coalition of northern European states that aimed to protect neutral shipping from British interference. But for the British, their goal was met, which was ultimately to stop the Danish fleet from falling into French hands, securing them naval dominance in the region. The most famous moment of Horatio Nelson's career would come at the Battle of Trafalgar, a battle so legendary it cemented Horatio's name into British naval history forever. The Battle of Trafalgar was fought on October the 21st, 1805, and was a decisive naval engagement between the Royal Navy, led by Nelson, and the combined fleets of France and Spain. The battle took place off the south coast of Spain near Cape Trafalgar, which, for context, is around here on this map. The battle was all a part of Napoleon's plans to invade England, something he planned to do before. The only problem is, at this point in history, fighting the Royal Navy was kind of like fighting a losing battle. Britain have built their vast empire on being the kings of the seas, and Napoleon, knowing this, knew that in order to invade England, he would have to take out the Royal Navy first. However, as we all know, there was one man leading the Royal Navy who would quite literally sacrifice his own life to protect his own nation. The British fleet, commanded by Horatio Nelson from his flagship and very famous HMS Victory, consisted of 27 ships compared to the Franco-Spanish fleet with 33 ships, which was led by Pierre-Charles Villeneuve. Sorry if I have butchered that name, but I thought I would give it a go. So on to Nelson's strategy. He essentially devised a bold and unconventional plan known as Nelson's Touch, which of course we discussed at the Battle of the Nile. Essentially, Nelson was a very aggressive admiral, and his actions really showed this, especially in the Battle of Copenhagen, where of course he disobeyed his superior's orders. So what is Nelson's Touch? Well, it means that he divided his fleet into two columns and aimed to cut through the Franco-Spanish line perpendicularly. I really hate that word. The engagement began once the British fleet started to advance in two columns towards the French and Spanish line. And despite heavy fire from the combined fleet, the British ships managed to successfully break through the enemy line, causing chaos and confusion. And somehow, HMS Victory was actually not too bad of shape after this war, which is kind of crazy to me, considering it was leading out the front. But anyway, this tactic was essentially unheard of at the time, and even Nelson's captains didn't think this was a good idea. But Mad Lad Nelson insisted and reminded them to trust them. Horatio wouldn't tell his men to do something that he wasn't prepared to do himself, and his famous HMS Victory were leading in the front of these two columns. After 5 hard hours of non-stop naval warfare, the British fleet managed to achieve a resounding victory, capturing and destroying 22 of the 33 Franco-Spanish ships. The naval power of both combined forces was significantly weakened, and the invasion of Britain was now mere fantasy. However, not everything was positive for the British. There was one major negative to come out of this battle, and that was the sad death of the famous and very beloved Admiral Nelson. During the battle, he was mortally wounded by a musket round to the shoulder and died aboard his beloved HMS Victory. And the thing about his death is it lasted a very long time, like a good few hours, so the death was very prolonged. Most famously, at the last moments of Horatio Nelson's time on this planet, he was informed he had won the battle and defended his homeland. And at the news of this great victory, his famous last words were, "Thank God, I have done my duty." To die a warrior's death was such a fitting end to such an amazing admiral, and really showcased how he truly invested his life and soul to his profession and his country. Following the death of Horatio, he was widely mourned in Britain, and his state funeral was a grand affair by all accounts. He was taken to St. Paul's Cathedral to lay to rest. One of the most iconic monuments in London, and if you've ever been, you've probably seen it, and the best one in my opinion, is Nelson's Column, which is a 169-foot monument honouring the nation's best ever admiral, and sits proudly in the city of Westminster, overlooking central London, and to be fair, sometimes a lot of drunk football fans. Horatio Nelson's personal life was a mixture of triumphs and controversies, and his relationships continue to be subjects of historical interest and discussions, which I'll perhaps cover in a longer video. But despite his personal challenges in life, the leadership and naval achievements have left such an important mark on the legacy of British history. I couldn't have possibly given this man justice in such a short video like this, but I just wanted to cover some of the highlights of his career in hope that it gives people a quick understanding on the man and his significance in naval history, and specifically the Napoleonic Wars, which of course he played an integral part. Horatio Nelson once said, "England expects that every man will do his duty," and he certainly practiced what he preached.